Welcome back, guys. We're going to start writing the code now for our options panel, our options menu. And just to note, it sounds like my computer is about to launch into space. All right, so what we have to do now is we're going to create a script file. And I'm going to call this one setting manager. Settings manager? Setting manager. Setting manager's fine. I'm going to also create another script file. Just get out of the way. I'm going to call it game settings. All right, now just to break it down, setting manager is going to handle the logic, the events. So whenever I change something, it's going to update the quality settings, and it's going to be where we save out the data and load in the data and stuff like that. Game settings is going to be the class that's the blueprint for our settings file. So I'm going to go ahead and open up game settings. We're going to define the settings properties. We'll start off with an integer that would represent our, we'll do a bool that will represent our full screen. Are we full screen or are we not full screen? We'll have let's say I have an integer that represents our texture quality. Keep typing quality. We'll have an integer that represents our anti-aliasing level. Anti-aliasing. We'll have an integer that represents our vsync. 012, 0248, and 012, 01. Cool. So then we'll have a resolution, which this won't make sense right now, I don't think, but what we're going to have is we're going to have a list of resolutions, or I think we're going to have an array of resolutions that we add to the list, but that'll make sense. And what are you doing? What are you doing? What is this? No, I didn't try. I'd stop. So we'll have an array of resolutions that we go into and access each resolution that we want by key, right? So if we were to pick resolution 1920 by 1080, that would be, say it's in the list somewhere, it's at index 54. Well, I would know that I have saved 1920 by 1080 as my selected resolution, so I would select it by the index 54. That's much easier than having to serialize out, like, it's 1920 by 1080, and then the refresh rate. We could just take it and serialize out a single number, a single integer, that would be the resolution index. That'll make more sense when we get there. And what? There's probably one more thing, right? Oh yeah, there's the music volume. That's going to be a float because it's going to be between 0 and 1, or we could up it into 0 and 100, but 0 and 1 works just fine. So there is that. It does not need to be a mono behavior, and we don't use any system.collections. Or actually, yeah, it's going to be, it's fine like that for now. If we want to throw in some other stuff later on, we might change some things around, but for now it's fine. Now I'm going to open up my setting manager. Now this I will need, first of all, we'll need references to each UI control that we're using. So we'll need references to the texture quality dropdown, the full screen toggle, and so on. So we'll go ahead and set those up. We'll also need something to store our resolutions in, and then we'll have to set up our delegates for the events when it comes to the UI elements. So I'm going to type out all of the fields for the controls. And I'm going to, just to know, I'm going to get these, plugging them in through the inspector. So it's going to be, we're going to be using stuff from the Unity engine.ui. Go ahead and include that namespace. So we know we have the toggle. It's going to be a public toggle, full screen toggle, and then public drop down, resolution drop down, and it's going to continue just like that. All right, cool. So now I'm going to create the resolution array. That's going to store all of the available resolutions in our environment for us to reference later. The method we're going to use returns a resolution array, as you see here. So that's important that it's a resolution index. It returns a resolution array, and that's what it returns. So now I'm going to go into my start here. Actually, I want to use just on enable for this one. So whenever the panel, well, let's see. Okay, let's think about this. Where is the setting manager going to be? It's going to have to be initialized in game somewhere. It's probably going to be on like a game manager or something like that. So on enable would be a fine place to initialize everything. That's fine. We'll do on enable, and we'll set resolution. Let's make that resolutions. We'll set resolutions to be equal to screen. That's the class we're going through. Screen has some stuff available for us, and it knows, hey, I'm looking for a resolution type, so it goes to what returns me a resolution array. Cool. So I'm looking for screen.resolutions, and I'm assigning resolutions to be that now. I'm just referencing it, so I could just go through screen.resolutions each time, but this makes it a bit cleaner, I think, so we'll just handle it this way. Also, I want to create an instance of game settings because it's going to be your blueprint. These aren't static, right? Like if we were to have a static class, like a manager class for this, it'd be more difficult for us to serialize out the data. We'd have to clone it and serialize it out. So if I wanted to, at least the way I'm handling it, that's the way I'm handling it. So if I'm going to do it this way, I'm just going to say, we'll just make a new field for this. It's going to be game settings, and I'm going to call it game settings. Notice game settings is our class, game settings, okay? That's the type of class we're using, or it's the class we're using. And I'm going to say game settings, that game settings, the one we just defined, is equal to a new game settings. Now, if you're new to object-oriented programming, this is probably not the place to get your first lesson, but if you're not, this makes sense. All we're doing is we're initializing a new instance of the class we created called game settings. It's going to create it with a bunch of null values, 0 values in our case, because I think they're all integers. And that's going to be fine, because then we can go through and we can add two game settings. We can say that game settings, the one we created, the field. Anti-aliasing is equal to 2. And it'll put that in this object we just created. Okay, so then we can reference that later on, and we can write it to a file, and we load the file in to load the settings back. We can put it into game settings, and we can just read it from that again. It's all real easy to handle once we get the system going. All right, so we have game settings, we have our resolutions set up. So resolution is going to contain all the available resolutions. Game settings is going to contain the entire settings for the game. Now you could do something with game settings to make it accessible from other parts of your game. So if you wanted the static version of that, feel free to do whatever you want if you want to be able to access it from wherever. So what I want to do now is I want to set up the events for our full screen toggle, resolution dropdown, all that stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and go in here and start defining those methods. It's going to be a public, it's going to be a void, and I'm going to say on full screen toggle. And this is what's going to happen whenever full screen gets toggled. I'm just naming them. They don't have to match anything. There's nothing right now. I'm just coming up with a name, and then later on, we'll define what gets called when an event happens. So the name right now does not matter. Just make sure it's relevant, right? On is a good starting point for when a trigger event happens. So on full screen toggle is saying when full screen toggle happens, on full screen toggle. Makes sense. So public on resolution change. This gets called whenever the value changes in on resolution. Public void on texture quality change. And on anti-aliasing change. and on vsync change on music volume. So we have the skeleton laid out where these are the things that are going to be called whenever a value changes or something happens, and then we'll do or handle our logic in each method. Cool. I also need something for saving the settings out. Some call it save settings, and then loading settings, the load settings. Cool. And now it's set up our events so that they call the appropriate method when it happens. So to do this, since we're going to be doing it in code, this might be a first time for you guys, so I'm going to explain it step by step. I'm going to grab the full screen toggle that we have, public toggle, full screen toggle. And I'm going to go to it, and I'm going to, when I hit my period, I'm going to see what's available for it. And the event I'm looking for is on value change. I want to know whenever the value went from something to something else. That means we interacted with it. That means something should happen. So I'm going to say on value change. See, on value changed is a toggle.toggle event, toggle.onValue changed. The callback executed when the value of the toggle is changed. Exactly what we need. And I can say another period there. It's going to give me add listener. What does that mean? We're going to subscribe a method to an event on full screen toggle called on value changed. That means that this method is going to be fired because it's listening to this event when that event is called. Does that make sense? I think so. So this is looking for a Unity engine.unity events or events.unity action call. All we're going to do is we're going to say it's a delegate. And inside of our curly braces, we're going to define the variable, or the method, on full screen toggle. And there we have, on full screen toggle, is now subscribed to the event on value change of full screen toggle, the object. That's great. You may say that's much easier to do in the inspector. All I gotta do is drag and drop some stuff and it works. It's just much less prone to breaking if we have it like in hard, solid code. That's why I would also want to do the GameObject.find or something of that nature. Find it by tag or look under a certain object for these objects in start so that we don't have a reason to worry about them breaking. If I were to change the name full screen toggle, and I didn't say it was previously known as, there's a little attribute we can throw in there to go fix this, but that gets kind of annoying, then I would have to go back in and reassign the value to it in the inspector. If I were to handle it in start or on enable where we are now, it would be much easier to do because I would just have to change the name here and there. I'll just refactor the name, right click on it, rename. Right? Much easier to do. But we don't have the time for that right now, so I'm just going to go ahead and copy that. And I'm going to say this is going to be on resolution change. And it's going to be on the resolution drop down value change. Same event of a different UI control, adding the listener for on resolution change, which is that right there. I'm going to go ahead and go through and add all these other ones. And now we should have all of our methods tied into the events. Cool. So all we have to do now is whenever we change the value of one of the controls, it'll fire the appropriate event. So what we have to do is change the actual settings when that happens to the value of each different control. It's not that hard, really. It's going to be pretty simple to do. So the easiest one to do would be full screen toggle, so let's go ahead and do that one. I'm going to go through the screen and go to full screen. Screen is the class we're using. Full screen is the property we're playing with here. And we're going to set it to whatever the value of full screen toggle, I believe it is on, which I think is ridiculous. But anyway, the full screen toggle is on will say if it is on, it'll be true. If it is not on, it'll be false, right? So it's going to be true or false either way. I don't know why value had to be changed just for that, even though it could be still a value. I don't know. We'll see. But so now screen.full screen is going to be equal to whatever the value of our full screen toggle is. That's great, but what we're not doing is sending that information to our game settings field that we created there. I need that object to know the information, right? So what I could do is I could say game settings dot full screen is equal to blah blah blah. But that's silly whenever I already have information below it. So I could just say, add a space there, and I could say game settings dot full screen is equal to, and this will just go through a chain. It'll say this is equal to this, and this is equal to this. If that's equal to that, and that's equal to that, then that's going to be equal to whatever that is equal to. So this is equal to that. Okay, that was a dumb way to explain it, but you're just going down the chain, right? And that works just fine. And that's how we're going to handle most of these, except a couple of them will require some calculations and stuff. Let's jump on down to texture quality change. Let's say game settings dot texture quality is equal to, and then we can say it's equal to the texture quality drop down dot value, right? So the value is going to be 0, 1, or 2, and texture quality is looking for an integer that is 0, 1, or 2. 0 being low quality, 1 being medium quality, and 2 being high quality. But also, this is not setting the quality settings. It is just adding it to our game settings. So I can go through quality settings and say the texture quality. Now this is called master texture limit. It's a size limit. It changes the bitmap. So it's a size limit applied to each texture. So it needs another resolution limit in a sense, right? So I could set it to be equal to the what we just assigned that to, or I could do the same thing as we did before and say quality settings dot master texture limit is equal to game settings is equal to blah blah blah. It's just a chain of things that just works.